So it's Sunday afternoon, January the 19th, 2025. They say it's going to be a very good year, and when they do, other people criticize. So uh, today, let us talk about um, the various kinds of views. Much of this comes from Sutta number 117, the Great 40, out of the Majjhima Nikaya, where the Buddha says that right noble view comes first in a list of things that are supports and features of right noble um, unification of mind. We can call it integration. When a person becomes whole, when they're not a crowd anymore, when there's no divisions, that's basically what the Eightfold Noble Path is all about. And yet, many people have the wrong understanding of what samadhi is. Samadhi actually means integration, rightly integrated. So, the one reason why I want to review this topic today is to talk a bit about wrong view and ordinary right view. Now, wrong view in the suttas is fairly long and complicated, saying things like the guy who holds wrong view, he doesn't see a mother or a father, he doesn't see uh, uh, good and bad or right or wrong or anything like that. And I would like to introduce this as in a conceptual way as a pyramid that does not have a top. And then we'll look at ordinary right view, which is more like a pyramid that does have a top. And the top actually then is whatever is in charge, the authority. Now, in West, we normally see that who's in charge of what's in charge is some sort of God, or maybe some dictator or politician, or who has the most Lamborghinis, or who has the most dollar bills, who has the biggest company, whatever like that. They're the ones who are in charge, which means that they're the ones that hold the power. Now, this whole idea of a pyramid actually comes mainly from, it's ancient. It probably, in fact, predates Christianity, even back to the Roman Empire of who's the top dog. But Christianity turned it into a cultural thing that pervades Western mindsets. And then I'd like to introduce that in the sense of there's another way of looking at the world, and that is that there's no pyramid at all, that you're more or less part of a network. That in fact, I've heard that described in Thailand, that Thailand is not a pyramid, it's not a hierarchy. What instead it is that it's a network, and that you're born in that network, and your job is to figure out how to be happy, useful, beneficial in your place, wherever you find yourself.
Again.
Benny, you got a lot of road noise.
I accidentally hung.
All right. So the the network then is not like a partial pyramid or a pyramid in the sense that everybody has been trained since childhood that you've got to climb some kind of ladder. that having power is important, and the higher you go in the hierarchy, the more power you have, and therefore the more safe you are. At least that's the belief system. To where the reality is, in fact, I think that it's a drawing that was manifested from the book called Dante's Inferno, where you have a great big pyramid, high pyramid, made out of human beings, not well dressed, by the way, loincloths at best. And everyone is climbing the pyramid, trying to get to the top, but the only thing that you have to climb on is other people. So in order to get ahead, you step on somebody's shoulder, you step on their head, you step on their face. In rare occasions, they'll put handouts so that you can climb up. But if you ever manage to get to the absolute top, there you'll find, in not only this drawing, but in reality, that there are people that are not supporting you by you standing on them. Rather, they're pulling your leg down, trying to get in on top in front of you. And so it's always a battle, even at the top. There's no particular place that's actually safe. And we can see several examples in, let us say, modern political world where that's true. Putin does not feel safe, even though he's the top dog. There are forces and things that are pulling him back down. You can also see that Trump wanted to be president because there he would feel safe from prosecution. And look how many hands there are on his legs trying to pull him down. And so it's not safe at the top. You could actually go so far as to say that the most unsafe place there is at the absolute top. Because the people that are pulling your leg are the ones who have gotten almost to the top. They're very experienced at climbing and stepping on people. So you have absolutely the worst enemies, the ones that are closest to you. And this is the hierarchy that we have as our society. And that, so you could say then that someplace above that hierarchy is an even higher hierarchy, a higher pyramid that's supernatural, where you've got some sort of God up there. And people are climbing that pyramid in order to get closer to God. So you've got a pope at the top of his pyramid, and yet, is that safe place? A good example of the fact that it's not is that when it was Pope Alexander VI, his name was Borgia, and he wanted to be the Pope, and so he poisoned 3 new popes in a row, and so every pope got poisoned, and so nobody wanted to be a pope. And so they let him be a pope just to stop him from poisoning people. In fact, he had an illegitimate daughter called Lucretia Borgia. Have you ever heard her name? She's quite famous in history. Lucretia Borgia, she was famous for having a ring that was hollow and that she could pop it open and poison somebody's drink while she was serving it. All right, that's how she poisoned all the other popes, was because she was able to use that ring. And that he was pope around the time of around 1500 and died just a couple of years or so before Martin Luther nailed that bull to the door. That in fact his major issue with the Catholic Church was this one pope, Alexander VI, whose name was Borgia. So, by the way, he was also the one who was trying to get a lot of money so that they could build some cathedral or something some basilica, and that's where the indulgences came in. That will, if you pay the church a whole lot of money, then we'll give you, let us say, a rope to that higher pyramid, get you closer to God, etc., like that. So this is that whole quality of the pyramid that we have been born into, each one of us, thinking that we are unsafe wherever we are, and we have to climb in status, climb in education, climb in salary, climb in power in order to get safe. Guess what? The higher you climb, the less safe it is. And so the one thing about this drawing that I'm talking about is that the drawing also shows beside this pyramid that's got thousands of human beings, each one stepping on each other, there's a few who have walked away from the pyramid. They're the ones who have found freedom, is because they walked away from that pyramid. Now, I'll bring in wrong view for just a moment, because we can see that, in fact, that wrong view is based completely on selfishness. That it's you. You're it. You could almost think of it as atheism, in the sense that you can get away with anything. There's no mommy and daddy that's going to fuss at you. There's no gods or demons or whatever that are going to get you, that you're on your own. And if you can get away with it, you can get away with it. This is a worldview. It's a common worldview. And somehow, for some reason, it tends to fit in with this ordinary right view pyramid scheme, except that there's no top. That once you get to a certain level, you become kind of immune. So now let's talk about what the Buddha was saying was noble right viewing. And noble right viewing means that you can, in fact, see all of the nodes that you are connected to. Through your sights and sound and touch and feeling and mental states and all of this kind of stuff is how you are in touch with reality. And we need to keep doing that, because the likelihood is that we will fall back into our pyramid mentality. That I've got to climb, I've got to get something, I've got to go someplace. So does anybody have any questions about this so far? You kind of got it, huh? All right. So you could say then that wrong view is merely a concept. It's kind of like a worldview. And it's based in selfishness, and it's insecure. And then you have right ordinary view, which is a full pyramid, a full hierarchy, and no place on that pyramid or hierarchy do you find safe, secure position. It's always dangerous that if you relax, somebody's going to step on you to get over you. But if you look at your life in the sense of fitting into a network, all we have to do is to learn to happily fit in to wherever we are, whatever station in life that we have. So, from that, I'd like to change topics a little bit and talk a little bit about something that happened yesterday. Ivan, I think, had the question about action. That in fact, when we're on that pyramid, we've got action. The action of getting stepped on, or the action of stepping on somebody, the action of gaining something, etc., like that. And that the question at hand is that all action, is that based on unwholesome thought? So I'd like to give two examples. The first example that I gave was yesterday. Imagine that the faucet in the kitchen suddenly burst, and now you've got water spewing all over the kitchen. What do you think about that, Carl? What's your thought? You got pipe burst, the spigot broke, you got water spewing all over the kitchen. What's your thought? Your microphone is muted. Microphone doesn't work. Okay, Ben, what's your thought?
I've always wanted an indoor swimming pool.
All right. Okay. Pulling my leg. Climbing that arcade. How about you, Arlene?
Brilliant. My thought would be, what a nice opportunity to wash my feet.
Does anybody have the idea? Let's go stop that faucet from spewing water all over the kitchen. Didn't you
Yes,
have
that
that
was
thought
me,
actually?
Dhammarato.
Huh?
Sorry, Dhammarato, that was my thought. Yes, turn the valve straight off, stop the water leaking.
Yes, okay. So now the next point would be, how about somebody having the thought, not my kitchen? And then we have the idea, well, it's somebody's kitchen. We still have to go stop that leak. Just like Mikey and I have found bugs on the website. We just found another. Didn't take us long to fix it, but the thoughts that we were having while we were fixing that, in fact, this was a fatal error. A fatal error, that's the same as the, the water spewing all over the kitchen, right? And so my premise is that when we have a thought of, oh, we have to act, then that's an unwholesome thought. However, that does not make it a bad situation. It only means that it's a call to action. It's not bad. In fact, a good idea is to go happily fix that faucet and then happily clean up after, and then happily relaxed after the faucet's at least stopped its spewing. All right, so I'll have another analogy in that realm, and that analogy is, what if someone is spewing criticism on you? What if somebody is criticizing you? Ben? We try it and see. Come on, Ben, give me an answer. You're slow. It's not much criticism. You're ugly too.
That's your opinion. You can. That's okay. You can have it. That's fine.
All right. So now the thing of it is that this is a situation to where the criticism that's being spewed is not my kitchen. It's not me. It's not mine. Let the criticism fly. That's more of a wholesome thought, right? And so the best way to handle criticism is by doing nothing at all, because you don't have to do anything, because he missed his target. He wanted to spew his criticism all over me, but guess what? I wasn't around. No me there. And so this is a way of looking at it then, is that we do have unwholesome thoughts that bring on action, but we can change that into, we can fix this. And in fact, that fatal error was actually quite easy to fix. All we had to do was to update a plugin and back together again. But it could have taken weeks of hard work to fix it if it had been something else. Well, guess what? Who made the work hard? Who makes the work hard? Yeah, exactly. We make the work hard ourselves because we continue to have the unwholesome thoughts. Oh, I've got to get it fixed. Oh, I've got to get that water faucet stopped up. Oh, I've got to get rid of that critical error. Oh, I've got to get rid of that thing. I've got to get rid of that criticism. Oh, how dare he criticize me? I mean, after all, I'm one of the big dudes on Reddit. How dare he criticize me? Or if you're someplace on that pyramid, like if you're quite at the top, how dare they call Elon Musk Mr. President when Trump says, I am the president? All right, look at that. That's all the selfishness. That's all the ego, and it's got real pain in it. So, if we can in fact come to the point of saying that, well, it's not really my business. It's not my business. Whatever they're criticizing, let them criticize that. It's not my business. Oh, well, Putin has invaded Ukraine. There's people dying in Ukraine. The European Union and the NATO is all upset and giving them weapons and all of that kind of stuff. But how about you, Mikey? Does Ukraine belong to you? How about you, Thomas? Does Ukraine belong to you?
I don't believe so.
All right.
No.
So why should we feel bad then if Putin is destroying Ukraine? Not my business. So this is a phrase that we can learn today, is you can go around applying that issue of not my business almost to the point that the entire pyramid of society is not my business. Our job is to be the one who gets out of the pyramid and become free from it. Now, that's real freedom, because you can see that, in fact, all of Christianity is based upon that hierarchy with some God at the top, which means that everybody that's under the top dog of the pyramid is subject to the dog at the top. You're a servant. You're a slave. You're a slave to the society. You're a slave to the teacher. You're a slave to the community that you live in. You've got obligations. And obligations are not really the same thing as responsibilities. That responsibilities have the quality of ability to respond as opposed to reacting. But we've got obligations in our society. You've got, Vinny, you've got to stop when the cops pull you over. You've got to stop. That's the hierarchy that we live in. But you don't have to feel bad. But we do have to meet our obligations if we're going to live in the society. Me, I don't have to worry about the cops ever stopping me. I'm not in that driver's pyramid. I don't drive. I sit in the passenger seat. And so it's not my problem, not my worry. In fact, I've never seen a cop ever stop anybody on Kopangan. Have you ever seen a traffic stop, Mikey? You've only been here a year.
I've been stopped one time. But that was quite the rarity, we'll say.
Yes, it's quite rare. The police are normally not out stopping people here. How about Oklahoma?
In Oklahoma, I would get stopped for doing nothing.
And
I remember-
often.
Yeah, one time I got stopped just because they thought I looked suspicious and I was walking around my neighborhood.
Right. Okay. Do you think that the cops see their lives as part of just a network to where they're just friends with everybody around, or do you see them as living in some sort of hierarchy to where each cop thinks that he's pretty close to the top of it?
They're living out a fantasy.
Mm-hmm. So we were all raised in that fantasy. The question is, can you remember whether it's a good idea right now to make it your business or not? Choose wisely, because most of the time it's not your business. Most of the time it's not your business. And in fact, most of the time, Mikey, when you're not driving your motorbike, it's not your business. So for the year that you've been here, it was only your business for 3 to 5 minutes out of a full year. All right, that's pretty good. That's not being on that pyramid very much. So this is the way that we want to start living our lives, is to stay out of other people's hierarchy, to stay out of other people's pyramids, to stay out of it because it's not your business. That you're already okay. All you need to do is to check things out to make sure that you're okay. That's what we're doing when we're in our network. It's just checking eyes, ears, touch, taste, sound, the thoughts that we have, and the environment that we're in. So in a way, there's there seems to be, it stopped for a while, but back about 2008 to 2010, there were a huge number of arguments about is there a God? And Christopher Hitchens and Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins and several others were just going all over the place, making a lot of money, having contact with and having debates with various Christians. Now, there is normally 2 venues. One would be a church, where most of the people who saw this debate went in as Christians, and every one of them who went in as Christian came out as a Christian. Nobody got their mind changed. And then the other venue was universities, where most of the students, or most of the audience, was students who did not believe in God. And guess what? They would come out not having converted at all. So the point is that those debates were kind of pointless, other than the guys who were giving the debates would get some sort of speaker's fee. And then it died for a while. I think that it really truly died about 2011 when Christopher Hitchens croaked. But it seems to have gotten started up again. And so we have all of these debates. Now, here's a question for you. Can someone actually answer this? Give me a correct, universal, spot-on definition of the word God. Isn't God, in fact, a matter of opinion? And how many different opinions are there? And so how could Christopher Hitchens and some famous preacher debate about it, does God exist or not, without actually coming to the point of defining what they're actually talking about? And guess what? Almost never they did. They never did. They never would give a correct definition, because if they could come up with a definition of what God was, they might come to agreement, and then where's our debate? So, can we, in fact, come up with a definition of the word God that works? Let us look at it in two senses. One would be in the sense of the pyramid. Whoever is ultimately at the top of the pyramid is God. Now let's look at it from the networking position. How about the interconnectivity and the interconnections of the network, the foundation of the network? Isn't that kind of a God? It's our interconnectivity. It's our environment. It's what we can see, touch, taste, smell. It's all part of our environment. And if we are, let us say, fitting into our environment, if we are satisfied with the environment that we're in, isn't that actually getting pretty in tune with God? Sort of atonement, at-one-ment, in-tunement. So it depends upon whether you're in a hierarchical system. And I think the problem with the atheist is that they that were debating the Christians is they never figured out that they're in a hierarchical pyramidal discussion. They don't actually ever considered a noble environmental network in order to define what they were discussing or talking about. Now, that's the thing then, is that if we can come to that state of interconnectedness with whatever is there, then doesn't that lead us to some sort of unity, some sort of harmony? That's what we mean by samadhi mind, is not being at the top of a pyramid, not being the famous guru, not being some huffy-duffy lion of a Buddha way up in the sky, but rather it's our interconnectedness is what makes us whole. And so I have a little joke for you in that regard. And the little joke is that three people found themselves sort of standing in line together. They all had seats together on the aircraft. And one of them was a priest. And naturally, he got the window seat. And then there was a Jewish rabbi. And naturally, he wanted to take the aisle so that he could control the plane. Where the priest, he wanted to be close to nature, close to God, so he took the window seat, leaving the poor Buddhist monk, who was not poor at all. He was quite happy just to sit in the middle between them. And so they were having a religious discussion. And in this religious discussion, there was a great big, let's say, air pocket or turbulence or whatever like that, and the airplane fell like 1,000 feet, called whump. And here that Catholic priest is doing this. I don't know if you can see it or not, but you know what they do is the genuflect. The Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, or whatever like that, the 4 stations of the cross, or whatever like that. He was doing that. And then out of the corner of his eye, he glanced and he saw that so was the Jewish rabbi doing the same thing. And so was the Buddhist priest, or the Buddhist monk, doing the same thing. And so he asked he asked the rabbi, "What are you doing?" Because he had thought he had won that argument. Oh, he's the boss. I've got them converted now. They're doing their genuflection. We'll have them baptized next week. And the Jewish rabbi, he says, "Oh, I was just checking things out. Spectacles, testicles, watch, and wallet." And so he asked, "Well, what about the Buddhist monk? What he is doing?" And he was saying, "Oh, I was just checking to make sure. Can I see straight? Is my actions correct? Am I breathing well? And is my heart open? All right, so they had different kind of views on that. One was spiritual, one was let us say uh, mundane reality based, and one was in reality at the super mundane level. So that little joke actually has quite a lot of stuff in it, in the sense, if you can see that the priest was still in his hierarchy. He was saying something like, oh, thank God that this airplane, you know, whether that airplane crashed or not had a whole lot more to do with Boeing engineers than it did God, whatever God is. And the Jewish rabbi, he was much more interested in, do I have all that I don't want to lose my watch, I don't want to lose my wallet, don't want to lose my spectacles, how's my testicles, etc., like that. But the Buddhist monk was checking the network. He was checking not a hierarchy, not a metaphysical hierarchy, not a social hierarchy. He was checking his network. So those three examples in this joke actually point at the priest being in wrong view, the Catholic priest being in ordinary right view, and the Buddhist monk was in right noble viewing. So when something happens, like the water goes off, which state are you going to be in? Oh shit, the water's off. That's the priest. Oh no, I can fix it. The priest. And the Buddhist monk, what does he say? Not my water faucet. And you notice that we have to move back and forth with that just a little bit. Now, in a Wat, if the water goes off like that, the monks can find some layman to go fix it, and it's still not their problem. But here at this house, if the water goes off like that, I'll try to find a way into the kitchen to fix it, which means that I'm coming back into the mundane world, but I know I'm doing that, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with it, so long as you know what you're doing. Hello, Martin. Glad to see you. So, Ben, do you have anything to say about this little talk we've had today?
Nothing to say. Thank you, Dhammarato.
So, where are you going to spend your time? You're going to spend your time in wrong view, in ordinary right view, or in noble right observation and looking? A broken pyramid, a complete pyramid, or a network? Your choice.
I'll spend it right here.
Mm-hmm. So, how about you? How do you say your name, Arlene?
It's just Aurelian.
Aurelian. Okay. Now, that's what all right. It's got the A that makes it confusing for you. If it started with an O, I would know that it was an emperor. So you're the emperor here today, Aurelian. So, what do you think about today's talk?
I think it's great. I'm gonna start off with the breath. Well, continue practicing breath, and then move on to right effort and right thought. Yeah, the interconnectedness.
Mm-hmm. Ivan, what do you have to say?
Wait, okay, something's wrong. Yeah, not much. No thoughts.
Never mind. Thomas, do you have something to say?
You said Thomas, right?
Yes.
Yeah. No, it's your talk is in line with how my practice has been developing. I tried to apply a bit of right effort to avoid showing a lot more restraint in terms of like news and sport and YouTube and all of this stuff since the start of the year. And it's just interesting how obviously all of those algorithms are trying to make stuff your business. And if you get out of that, the longer you spend away from it, the easier it becomes. Mm-hmm. So I'm really enjoying, all of these things. Like I know that there's some sort of there's political events happening around the world, and you don't have to live your life around that stuff. So yeah, it's been I guess your talk has been quite affirming and in line with what I've noticed with my practice. I'm just a lot calmer generally because I have less stuff to distract me during the day, at least over the last sort of 3 weeks since I've been doing this. So yeah, thank you.
Very good. Very good. We have to keep remembering, though, which model are we going to be in? What kind of attitude do we have? Do we have the selfish attitude? Do we have the being part of a hierarchy attitude? Or do we have the attitude of I'm free? I can see what's going on around me. I'm not a slave to that system. Vinny, do you have a remark?
No, I'm fine, Dhammarato. Just happily driving along and listening to your chat. I just went offline. I was out of internet. But no, I think everything you say is spot on. Like you say, don't get caught up in it. Just try and stay as much as we can in the present moment and be aware of where our thoughts are going and what we're focusing on. As I was saying to my friend Paul today, I think your outside world is a reflection of your inner world. So if we focus on the Dharma and try and stay on the right path, I think we'll have a good life.
I would say that's correct, except that you've got it backwards. And that is that the outside world, the system, the human society just is. And it's a hierarchical society, and that every child is trained to be a reflection of that society. But we've got a choice. When we understand the Dhamma, we have a choice. Are we going to live in that hierarchy that the system has provided? Are we going to try to cut the top off of that pyramid and become selfish like a mobster? Or are we going to throw the whole thing out and start looking at our interconnectedness with our environment?
That makes more sense, doesn't it? Yes.
So how does your friend feel about this? Does he have any remarks? What's his name, by the way?
Paul.
Phil.
Paul?
Hi, Phil.
Paul.
I'm glad to have you on our call.
Thanks. Good to be part of it. I've been listening in. Just giving Vinny directions now. I like what you're saying, and how there's a world view out there, and I particularly like your story about the guy. Sorry, I've forgotten what it was now.
The water faucet?
Yeah, and so that water is not my problem, but I can come back into the world to deal with it as long as I know that I'm coming back into the world. I guess with the world being quite chaotic at the moment, and everybody being so busy, I know that's not my problem either, but sometimes I can get pulled back into that world because of the busyness, and I get to a point where I'm not aware that I'm being pulled back into it. And I think that's just a process that we go through. And the more we practice, the better we get at knowing what we're doing when we're doing it, I guess.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
You're exactly right. In fact, I warned and have warned in many other talks about that once we get pulled back into that hierarchy ignorantly, once we get pulled back into that hierarchy subconsciously, guess what? We don't wake up. We stay in that hierarchy.
Yeah.
So if we can wake up, we can climb out of that hierarchy again.
That's right. Yeah. A matter of awareness and practicing that awareness, and the more you do it, the more awake you are, I guess. Yeah.
All right, very good. Carl, do you have any final remarks? How about you, Martin? You were only called just a short time. What did you get out of it?
I'm happy, and I want to listen to it again from the beginning. Thank you, Dhammarato.
All right. Yes, it'll be online just within a couple of minutes after we finish the call. It'll show up, and you can redo it. All right. Well, Mikey, why don't you take this thing home?
Sure. Glad to be in this network, enjoying time spent with happy, satisfied friends. Speaking of which, if you'd like to continue participating in Sangha online, go to opensanghafoundation.org. We have a Sangha group page, and people have been posting in it. We've even seen some new friends that you may have not met before there. And also, we've been seeing quite a lot of activity on various Discords that members of our Sangha are involved with. So I'm going to post a link to those today as well. And yeah, go check them out. And yeah, have a good one, everyone.
So, Dylan, do you have any final remarks?
I like the analogy about the three religious practitioners on the plane. I have a question. How do you come up with these analogies? Because when I think of concepts, I'm thinking about them in such like an abstract form, but you're able to like beautifully weave together like different stories, which I've never been able to do. So I'm really like, I personally desire, like, how do I develop that quality? Yeah.
Well, the answer to that is I'm an old man. I've been around. I've heard these jokes. I remembered them, and then I put them into play when they seem to fit in with what we're talking about. Even before I became a monk, when I was still, let us say, deeply involved with psychology, even then I was gathering up a great big tool bag of tricks and stories and whatnot like that. Surprisingly enough, nowadays I don't use much of any of that kind of stuff. I've forgotten it. Let's see, how many years ago? 30, 40, 50, 55 years ago. And so I don't remember much about all of that, but I do remember having the thought of the quality of gathering up material.
Yeah, right. It's still really impressive to me because I struggle to remember stories in such detail, and the fact that you can recount the story without like stumbling and being like, oh, what happened then? Oh, what was this part of the story? Which is what usually happens when I try to tell a story, at least. Yeah.
Yeah, we have to keep track of what we're thinking, keep track of what we're doing. In fact, I can find on YouTube videos, often people will come on and seem to get tongue-tied. And then they know what they're talking about, but as soon as they're online, they get confused. Maybe when they get my age, they'll be able to think and talk consistently.
By the way, oh, go, sir.
Go ahead.
One thing that I personally feel like it's important to be careful about with the "it's not my problem" is using that as like a belief system to create aversion towards certain things, or showing up with a lack of compassion or apathy. So I'm curious your thoughts on that. But yeah, my current view is that like I've kind of been in this space before where I've used that kind of thinking as like a belief system or mindset that's created apathy, and it's created actually aversion towards going out and interacting in this physical plane. Yeah.
All right. If you don't mind, I'll take a couple of minutes and talk about that. And that is that at least in the beginning, it's a good idea to see that that world out there is not there to do you any good. It's inviting you to start climbing the pyramid, but I would invite you to start having some aversion for that world. It's okay to see it as what it is, and it's not wholesome. In fact, in many ways, it's downright dangerous.
I thought the premise was we don't want to feel craving or aversion to any sensation. We see the reality as what it is, not as we want it to be, without craving or aversion.
Right, and well, we don't have to have that kind of craving or that kind of aversion. I'm not saying to have aversion in the sense of, oh no, the society is coming after me, but rather you can see it as that's what it is.
Okay.
You can still have a happy attitude. Wow, I'm glad I can see what that thing is. I'm glad I can see that that's a live terminal and I shouldn't touch it. I'm glad I don't have to jump into that cesspool because I can see it for what it is. So you don't have to have a negative aversion for it. Yuck, I don't like it. But in the sense of, aha, I can see that for what it is.
Yeah, I notice in the way you refer to these things is like a polarizing nature. So there's a nice positive, or there's like a I don't like this kind of view as well. And I'm wondering, why does it have to be those two? Could it just be neutrality?
This is the way that we need to look at it then. Have you ever heard of, there was a book by a guy back in many years ago. His name was Norman Vincent Peale. He was a big preacher in New York City, and he had a book called The Power of Positive Thinking. All right. And I gave a talk on that in the sense that what we're teaching here is not the power of positive thinking. We're talking about, in fact, as not looking for power, but to see reality as it actually is. To see your network without having the positivity of wanting something that's positive and aversion for that which is negative. In fact, see your own positive and negative polarities there and recognize that you don't have to go to either one of those extremes. You can sit there happily in the middle. Neither one of those extremes is your business. Your business is to stay away from the extremes, that you can see the nature of reality in our society. And in that regard, we can say that's dangerous. That an example of that would be getting alone. Getting alone is dangerous. That in fact, in the Bhikkhu Sangha, one of the qualities is they do not allow anyone to join the Sangha if they're in debt. You have to become debt free. And the original point with that was they didn't want the creditors to come to the temple to try to get the other monks to pay the guy's debts. But a more important point would be that when you're in debt, that means that you're part of that hierarchy. Let's not get stuck in that. Let's live our lives free from that so we can become debt free. Therefore, we don't have to worry about it in the sense of aversion, of hating that loan and hating that banker and hating to have to pay for it once a month. Instead, we can take a deep breath and say, wow, I'm glad I don't have to do that. And now almost always we got in debt because we saw something positive. We saw that car. So we went in debt to get that car. We got in debt because we wanted that house. We saw things as positive. That's the reason we got in debt in the first place. But if we can see things not as neutral, but rather to see them as they are, see the reality of the situation. That, for instance, the car is nice, but going into debt to get the car is dangerous. It's dangerous because I have unwholesome thoughts every time I think about that debt, every time I think about that payment. Those are unwholesome thoughts. Let's be free from that.
Yeah, a technique you often refer to as like a thought comes up and then you refocus it using kind of like a positive thought. Or
I wouldn't use the word positive.
Okay.
In fact, I don't. I'm glad that you brought that up so that we can clarify it. No, what we're going to do is the wholesome thought is not a positive thought. The wholesome thought is a real thought based in reality. That in fact, most of our positive thoughts are also unwholesome. But a wholesome thought is to see things the way that they actually are. Like, everything's all right. Everything is fine. Because actually, in reality, right now, Dylan, everything is okay. Everything is fine right now. That's the reality. No place to go and nothing to do is real.
I guess it's relativistic, right? Because words are just abstract concepts that are based on different ideas and concepts. And so saying everything's all right, like, means nothing, I guess. Like, nothing means nothing. Saying everything's all right. Yeah, everything is all right. But from a certain point of view, from a certain perspective, which is a fabricated perspective.
Right. Okay, so in the sense of the words themselves, like everything is all right, it's just words. It's almost a metaphor or a simile. And that the reality is when you come to the feeling of the relaxation of, well, everything really is all right. That's what we're looking for, not the language. That in fact, the Tao Te Ching starts off with the Tao, or in my case, or our case, the Dhamma that can be said is not the Dhamma. That we get hung up on language. And language, in fact, is, in fact, today I've told several stories. I've used analogies, similes, metaphors, and stories. And at the end of this, the point is that they are all wrong. Ultimately, they're wrong. To talk about it as a network is not exactly what it's like. To talk about it as a pyramid of human bodies climbing one another up to the top is not exactly what's going on. Or a half pyramid that's all built in selfishness is not exactly what's going on, but I'm pointing in a certain direction. And then we can talk about it that if I point in a certain direction, a lot of the students are going to start sucking my index finger instead of looking at what I'm pointing at. And so that's the problem with language, even if it's just visual pointing to, people can get confused. This is why we want to use a wide variety of analogies, a wide variety of stories and metaphors, so that we can get people to kind of understand that there's something in between all of that stuff, and what's in between is that reality that we can't actually define carefully, just like the word God. You can't define the word God. We can tell stories and metaphors and similes about it, but you can't define the word directly. Guess what? Most words are like that. In other words, the only real way of defining a word is by using other words that we may not have clear definitions of. And so language is pretty shaky. That's okay. That's all right. Got no problem with shaky language. The question is, can I be happy in the middle of all that shaky language built upon that shaky society, that pyramid? It's really not a pyramid at all. I don't even know quite what shape it is, but it's helpful to think about it as a pyramid climbing to the top. It's much more like a mountain range where there's a whole lot of different peaks. And in fact, the Pope is on a pyramid that's different, or a peak of a mountain is different than the peak that Vladimir Putin is on, which is different than the peak that the governor is on, which is a different peak than the one that Donald Trump is still trying to climb up to. And so that's the issue, is that language is often in Buddhism a barrier. So it's often a barrier. And I know that. That's why I keep coming up with as many different stories as I can, is to point you in the general direction of the feeling of everything is all right, everything is fine, enough, just enough, everything is good enough. This is a kind of a feeling, but the words enough and everything is all right often don't do the job, because it doesn't take the student in his own talk, in his head, in his own language, to that point of feeling like he's the winner, that everything is really all right. I got this thing under control. Yeah, we can do this. But these are feeling words, and notice in my language that I'm putting that kind of emphasis of putting those feelings into it. Like, wow, this is great. Everything is really okay. Can you bring yourself to that state of feeling? You can feel that everything is fine without getting trapped in the language itself.
So it's kind of like have you heard of affirmations?
Yeah, that's exactly the same thing as the power of positive thinking. These are not affirmations. These are realities.
Can you do wholesome affirmations, like wholesome thoughts, wholesome affirmations, under the same? I wouldn't
call them affirmations unless you don't believe them. If you don't believe them, then they're affirmations. If you can actually feel that way, then they're not affirmations. They're your experience of reality.
Okay. So given the tendency of the mind and the thinking mind to not see the truth, would you think it's better to create wholesome thoughts, or just let go of the thoughts, drop the ball, which is another kind of school of thought, which is don't engage with the thinking, don't engage with the mind, just drop it.
The answer is you don't have the skills to do that until you're well practiced. First, you have to learn to control the mind and learn to control the way you feel and learn to control your attitude. And then once you're in control, you can, let us say, stop the car.
Okay. Right. So that's the more effective late stage progression of this journey. The early stage progression would be create wholesome thoughts, but later on being more of a, I guess, Vipassana style, just notice sensation, redirect back to sensation would be the approach that naturally lets go of that whatever is occurring mentally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the feeling.
But always remember that this is a change model. Vipassana, as they speak of it, mindfulness meditation, as they speak of it, is not a change model. They leave out the most important part of right noble effort to make a change.
Can you do Vipassana whilst keeping the change model, or are the techniques quite incompatible? Because Ed Retreat did make it seem like
Wait a
you really don't
minute,
want to
you'll
change.
have to define the word Vipassana.
Yeah, I'm just talking about it in the way I understand Vipassana, as in body scanning and noticing a nature
Word
in relation to.
Vipassana, actually, it means going into, like the word passage, and the word V means like into. So we also have Vihara, which means in the heart or going into. So the word Vipassana is often translated as insight, but we have to understand that we're not going to some great big insight. This thought, can you see this thought is unwholesome? That's the insight. So the insights are small, but also it helps to bring us to a steadiness. The word samatha actually means, possibly a good analogy for the words samatha would be grounded or stable. Stable is a better word because stability doesn't mean permanently attached to where grounded often does. So,
Yeah.
so stability. Now, let me give you this analogy. The analogy is it's true on modern cameras, but in the old days it was more true because the film was not all of that great. They had the A400 and A200 and all these kinds, and then they would have 1600. The point that I'm making is that in the very early days of photography, they had to put the camera on a tripod in order to get a good picture because they would open the lens for 1 or 2 seconds. And if you're holding it, so think of being able to put the mind onto a tripod so that you can get stability, so that you can see clearly. And that seeing clearly then is what we would call Vipassana, to be able to actually see the kind of thoughts that we have, to where if the mind is agitated, let us say the instant that we recognize that the faucet has burst and the water is spewing all over everywhere, guess what else burst? Is our, oh, I've got to go do something kind of feeling. We're not stable right then. There's no insight into that unless we've already developed it. Oh, well, seeing that I've got to go do something about that is unwholesome, but I can handle that unwholesome for a little while to get the faucet fixed, and then I can go back into the state of being wholesome rather than having that faucet upset me all day. And so samatha and vipassana work together, and that when they talk about vipassana meditation, they don't know the suttas. They do not know what they're talking about. They heard it from someone else who didn't know what they were talking about. The word vipassana, in fact, is not used very much in the suttas, but samatha is. And so getting the stability so that we can see clearly would be samatha vipassana. Now, there is a sutta where it says if you have developed one without the other, then stop what you're doing and go get and develop the other. If you have samatha without vipassana, go get with the stability that you have now, go start looking. If you develop the looking, go get some stability so that you can look better. And then the third one is if you don't have either one of them, develop them together.
So what's the recommended practice to develop samatha?
Pardon?
What's the recommended practice to develop samatha?
The same as it is for the vipassana, and that is anapanasati. Anapanasati develops both of them.
Okay.
And,
And
and the Anapanasati is actually nothing more than the Eightfold Noble Path in practice, except that in Anapanasati, we break it into the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And so we have samatha by getting the body to be still. It will then relax. To get the mind to be still, we can see the thoughts and see the attitude, and so that we can change our attitude, we can change our thoughts, and that'll change the attitude. And when we change our attitude, that will help us to change our feelings. And so the Eightfold Noble Path, with right noble looking, right noble remembering to look, and the right noble effort to make a change, is the way that we practice Anapanasati with all 4 foundations. Not one of them, well, the way to say it is one by one as they occur. Whichever comes up for you, that's the object that you're going to take.
okay.
And in the beginning, we start working with thoughts, but very quickly we start working also with our attitude, because our attitude determines our thoughts.
Is there if there was a simple guide or book that covered this set of instructions, is it somewhere that I could find?
Well, I would recommend Bhikkhu Buddhadasa. I would also recommend the sutta that we've been talking about today, sutta number 117. And then I would recommend the most important book of all, and that is the one between your ears.
We also have a playlist on Dhammarato's YouTube channel called Introduction to Buddha Dhamma, and there's a number of videos that go over all of Anapanasati.
Yeah, awesome. I'll check it out. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for saving my butt there, Mikey. Okay, guys, let's go ahead and finish up now. This has been a nice talk. Thank you, Dylan, for asking your questions. That gives people a kind of a basis, a foundation of what we've been talking about in the talk today. We'll see you. Thank you all.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Dhammarato.
Dhammarato.
Everyone.
Thank you.
It's been a wonderful